For me, there's so many different things that make a book great, and it could be the story, you know, like amazing plot. It could be a thriller that had me completely blown away, and trickery and all that great stuff. It could be a book that had me on the edge of my seat, maybe a story I didn't see coming that just surprised me, something that just maybe warmed my heart or broke my heart or gave me all the feels. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. It is the time of year for the year-end list, the best, the worst, all the in-betweens, and today we are doing my favorite books of 2020. Are they all 5-star reads based on what I rated them on Goodreads? No. Does that make them not good? No. It takes a lot for me to give a book a 5-star, but there's just so many warm and fuzzy feelings about so many of these books. We're gonna jump right in no particular order. These are the books that have all of my happy feelings for 2020. This is a book that I read really early in the year, and it stuck with me the entire time, and it's The Escape Room by Megan Goldin. You're gonna get some light on this one. So this is a locked room mystery in the sense that you have people trapped in an elevator, and they are the unwilling victims of an escape room. And this is really dark and twisted. I absolutely loved it. It is jam-packed with unlikable characters doing unlikable things, which I also love so much. So this is about 4 people who work on Wall Street who are lured to this abandoned warehouse, and they get in this elevator under the guise of having to go to a meeting, and they wind up getting stuck in it, and they find out that basically this is not a joke, this is not a drill. It is their mission to try and get out alive, and somebody has them trapped in this elevator, and someone is out getting some sick revenge on them. And I just loved it. So you do get some dual timelines, you do get multiple points of view in this book, and I just thought it was clever and well plotted, and again, unlikable, dark, disgusting characters, and I just was totally there for it. After I read this book, I became an instant fan of Megan Goldin, and she's an auto-buy author for me. And I did also read her second book, The Night Swim, which came out later this year, or later in 2020, which was also very well done, but this one for me was the front runner for sure. Next up is Allison Galen's Never Look Back. And this book is all the things I also love from a trope standpoint, in that you have multiple personalities, multiple points of view, multiple timelines. There's a podcast element to it in that one of our point of view characters is a podcaster, even though you don't actually get his podcast in here. And this is another one that got dark and gritty and twisty, and I just love an author who goes there and doesn't play it safe and does the unlikable things and the dark things. And it's really like a nobody's safe kind of a situation, in that they're not precious about their characters. And I think, you know, I always have a writer hat on when I'm reading books, and I think it is very easy to fall in love with your characters and not want to make them do bad things or say bad things or be unlikable. And I think she just does a beautiful job of making people really unlikable, but also making you care about them and be invested in them as characters. And I've read multiple Allison Galen books before, but this one really just pulled me straight in. And I actually did a combo of audiobook and physically reading this one, and the audiobook is great as well because you get multiple actors and actresses. Again, the story just pulled me straight in, and you have 2 teenagers back in the 70s who basically go on like this 13-day killing spree, and then you have a character in the present who's the podcaster who is investigating what happened, and then he reaches out to somebody who is our third perspective to talk to her about the case, I would say. And she is completely in the dark about it, and she doesn't know anything about it, but he's found what he believes is a connection. So it's very well woven together, and again, you get the multiple perspectives, and it's one of those books where like things are not what you think they are and things are not as it seems, and I was here for it. Another author who became an auto-buy love of mine after I read her book is Lucy Foley's The Hunting Party. And this book came out a couple years ago, but I just read it this year, and again, dark, twisted characters doing dark, twisty, unlikable things. It is multiple points of view, it is multiple timelines, only in a matter of days though in this one. So in this one you have a group of best friends who went to college together, and they are away for New Year's Eve weekend at the Scottish hunting, I wouldn't even call it a resort. It's just sort of like a getaway in the Scottish Highlands, and you get a blizzard and a storm, and they are cut off from the rest of the world, and you know, the cell phones don't work and like all that wonderful fabulous stuff that you need to have a great isolated mystery. And you find out on page 1 that somebody dies, but you don't know who it is, and then you start to go forwards and backwards in time to figure out who it is that's dead, and then obviously who done it. And I just loved how this was plotted, and I loved the characters in this, and I've talked about this in other reviews that I've done of it. This was one of those stories where I felt like any one of them could have been the killer, and they were all just so like gross and unlikable that any one of them could have justifiably been a victim of, you know, of the story. And I loved it, and I loved how it was done. And I feel like a lot of people really ranked The Guest List as one of their favorite books, and I read that probably a month after I read this, and I did enjoy The Guest List, but I will say the structure and the plot device is the same in that book, in that you know somebody out of the gate is dead, you don't know who it is, you go forwards and backwards in time, it's a group of people. In that case, they are at a wedding on an isolated island. So maybe if I had read that one first, I may have liked it better, but from a structure standpoint, it felt like the same story to me. But ultimately, the characters in this felt much more sinister, and I just loved that friends from college and sort of the connections you have then, but I think it's like 10 years later, and like the animosity and the jealousies and the things you don't get over, and the preconceived notions that people have, and like the competition that exists between people, and things, you know, not being what they seem. So sort of your Instagram life not being the reality, and who you pretend to be to your friends sometimes is not who you really are. So I really liked the intricacies of the friendships and the relationships here, and what felt like an honest reflection, sort of murder aside, of what it can be like when you are friends with people who you meet when you're 17, 18 years old, and sort of where you end up 10, 12 years later, and what they thought of you then, and how sometimes you can't sort of break out of who people thought you were. I'm probably getting way too deep on this one, but just a great mystery and great thriller. So auto-by-author for me, and I just adored this one. Now, if you guys follow me, you know I love isolated mysteries. So there's another one on the list. It is A Death in the Family by Tessa Wiegert. And this is, as it happens, the first in a series. Her new book just came out, and I have it, and I'm super excited about it. And this is about a former New York Police Department detective, Shana Merchant, who winds up leaving New York or leaving the city and going upstate to her fiance's kind of sleepy hometown for a less stressful police life. And sure enough, her and her partner get called to an island near, you know, off the shore of where they're living. And it's a super wealthy family because they own an island, and one of the family members is missing. So they go out to investigate. A nor'easter hits, so they get stuck on the island with the family, and they're trying to figure out what happened. So there is blood in the bed, there is no body, and nobody knows what happened. This is just like dark family secrets. This is, again, unlikable people doing unlikable things. I also just loved her writing and her writing style. And I'm going to say this over and over again, but, you know, writer hat on. As much as I read books for enjoyment, I also read them for education. And I just loved how she crafted this story. I loved her descriptions. I loved the characters, slow development of them. I loved the little breadcrumbs about who they were and their past secrets and their current secrets, and, you know, who's lying and who's telling the truth. And I just was so pulled into the story, and I loved her relationship with her partner, Tim. I thought they were great together. And this was another one of those books that was not on my radar this year and was just such a gem of a find for me. So she has become an auto-buy, instant love author for me. I can't wait to dive into the second book. And I would say if you're looking for a good isolated mystery with some dark, creepy feels to it, this would be a great one to give a go to. The next book is also the first in a series, which is new to me, but I have book number 2, so I'm excited to get into it. And it's Bluebird, Bluebird by Attica Locke. And this is a story that also takes place in Texas. So we have Darren Matthews, who is a Black Texas Ranger, and he got out of town, but wound up having to come back. And he's kind of not in the best place at work, so he's a little bit on the outs at work. And his good friend from high school calls him up, who I want to say is in the FBI, and is kind of like, hey, I need your help to kind of quietly sniff around this double murder that has happened up off Highway 59. And this is a Highway 59 series. So Darren goes to just sort of softly look around and see what's happening. So there is a Black lawyer from Chicago who was passing through town who was found murdered. And then I want to say like a couple days later, this white waitress who works at a local bar where the lawyer was last seen is then found murdered. And people don't want to talk about it, and people don't want anyone sniffing around. And this is a town that is full of secrets and is kind of going to do anything they can to protect them. So Darren sniffing around does not make people happy. And then when the lawyer's wife comes to town also, desperate to find out what happened to her husband, they basically piss off a lot of people and things start getting kind of scary. So this is police detective, which I love, and investigation, which I love. And then you get, they are the outsiders in the small town, so nobody wants them around. And then you have the racial tension that happens, not only Darren coming in to investigate, but also the town trying to figure out, you know, what happened. Was there something going on between the lawyer and this waitress? What was the lawyer doing in town anyway? And everybody basically is, you know, shutting down, mouth closed, and nobody's going to talk about what actually happened. I also did not expect to be so just like yanked into this story, and I just couldn't wait to see what was going to happen next. I really like Darren as a character. He is dark, and he is complicated, and he's got baggage, and he's got history, and he's got some mysteries of his own family that he's trying to work out. And he's obviously got some issues that are happening at work that he is trying to work out. And by getting involved in this investigation, he is doing himself no favors in the mind of the Texas Rangers. So there is a lot going on here, but you get such complex characters, which I love. And you get a little bit of like past and present, even though they're not told in different timelines. There's a lot of secrets to this town and a lot of history to this town that starts to come out. So if you were someone who likes police detective and, again, dark and gritty characters and unlikable people and town secrets, this is definitely one to give a go to. So I will keep you guys posted on book number 2, but so far the series is off to a super strong start. So I did also read some books that were not about murder, that warmed my heart and that I loved to pieces. And one of them is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. And this was one of those like booktube babies. Everybody loved it. Everybody was raving about it. And it is romance, and it is not usually my go-to genre. And I was like, you know, everybody talks about this book. Give it a go, because you have put yourself outside your comfort zone. You've tried some things that you normally wouldn't read, and you've been pleasantly surprised. And damn if this was not one of those books that I did the audiobook, and I don't know, maybe like day 2 of listening to the audiobook, I was ordering the book online because I needed to have it, because I need to own it, and I need to physically read it, and I needed to mark up all the passages that just broke my heart and warmed my heart and gave me all the feels. So if you're one of the few people on the planet like me who had not read this book and are not sure what it's about, in a nutshell, this is about what happens when the first son of the United States falls in love with the Prince of Wales. And Alex and Henry are kind of arch rivals. They don't really like each other too much. And Alex, who is the first son of the President of the United States, the first female President of the United States, thank you very much, goes over to London for an event. And it's time to start thinking about the re-election. So like his mom, Alex's mom, needs some good publicity. And there's an incident that happens when he's in London between him and Henry, and they basically need to do some PR damage control. And the two of them get thrown together because neither one of them or their families need this bad publicity. And in an enemy to lovers story, they completely fall in love with each other. And I completely fell in love with the two of them. So I've talked about this in other videos also. I am a sucker for a British accent. The audiobook is so tremendously done, and every time Alex says whispers the word sweetheart to Henry, I just melt in all the pieces. Like I cried during this book. It gave me just all the feels. I love the entire cast of characters. I love their surrounding friends. There's, you know, some political shenanigans going on in the background because, again, Alex's mom is running for re-election, so there's a little bit of political stuff happening. But it was such a tremendous read. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. And I felt my little black heart melt into like a bazillion pieces when I read this book, and I'm excited to read it again. But so well done. So well done. A book that I read recently, which I've had for a long time, but was putting off for a long time, just because it was giant as all get out, and it scared me to death because of how big it was, is Night Film by Marisha Pessl. And this is a lot of book, and this is a lot of story. And I was so blown away. Everything about this, from how it was plotted to the characters to the use of mixed media in a way that is just like nothing I have ever seen before. There's news stories, there's like internet searches on the page. It has a very Evelyn Hugo feel, in the sense that like you feel like these are real people that you're reading about. You have a journalist as a main character. You have a very controversial director. His daughter goes missing out of the gate. It was so much going on, but in such a good way. And I completely understand why people obsess about this book and talk about how great it is. But if you're afraid of it, because it's huge, it's 600 pages, like I was, just know you're going to be in this book for a long time. But it's just so well done and so worth it. And again, it just felt real. The people felt real, the characters felt real. And to be able to do that in a way like Taylor Jenkins Reid does it, even though it's a completely different type of book, I just bow down to her as a writer and to the way that she can create these characters and really just have them fly off the page and feel like they are people that you just want to hop on Google and search, which I did. They don't exist, but I tried. Another recent read of mine that I didn't expect to love as much as I did, and I actually didn't know what I was going to think about it because I hadn't heard too many people talking about it, and it's The Shadow Friend by Alex North. He wrote The Whisper Man, which I haven't read yet, and this is a book about a past mystery and a present mystery, and our main character has to go back to the hometown that he left many years ago and has to confront a whole bunch of deep, dark secrets, and it's everything I love. So in this book, our main character, Paul, has to go back to his hometown because his mother is really sick, so he needs to go back and take care of her. And 25 years ago, one of Paul's friends murdered someone, and Paul has never forgiven himself for his part in what happened all those years ago. And as a twist of fate would happen, a murder very similar to the one in style that his friend committed 25 years ago has been committed in a nearby town. So the police come looking for Paul to talk to him about what happened back in the day, and he is forced to sort of confront and relive everything that happened then and try and figure out what's happening now, because his friend who committed that murder 25 years ago was never caught, even though he was the known killer. So you've got a lot of stuff going on here. But what was, I think, more surprising to me about this is, or there were a couple things. So for one, this gives me some of the Riley Sager vibes in that it dances the line of thriller, horror. Is there supernatural, paranormal? Is it just dark and twisted people doing dark and twisted things? And then beyond the thriller aspect of it all, there's also a real underlying story about grief here. And I didn't expect to cry when I read this book, and I did. And it just hit me in a way that I didn't see coming. And I absolutely loved it. And I thought it was so well crafted again. I thought the characters were great. I was completely pulled into the story. This was another one of those compulsive reads that I couldn't wait to get back to. And I was really just surprised by, I would say, like the roller coaster of emotions and all the things that I felt in it, because it was so much more than just a thriller. And I think that's part of what I loved about it. And then from a completely shallow standpoint, it's definitely one of, if not the most beautiful book that I've read this year. I die for this inside cover, which is why I didn't know that was happening, but I was drawn to the outside cover when I saw it online at Book Depository, which is why I got it. And then that just made it 100 times better. Another winner from an author that I raved about last year, and it's Jennifer Hillier's Little Secrets. So this was her 2020 release. I read Jar of Hearts last year, which I absolutely loved, blew me away. Still recommend that book to anyone who loves dark, messed up stuff. And this has got some dark and messed up stuff to it also. The premise of this book is that we have this perfect couple who has it all, and they are rich, and they have successful businesses, and they're in this beautiful marriage, and they've got this beautiful son, Sebastian, and he winds up getting kidnapped. And we fast forward like a year later, he has not been found. The FBI's case has gone pretty cold, and Marin and her husband are basically shadows of themselves, and their marriage has basically fallen apart. They barely talk to each other. And this is the story of Marin, who secretly doesn't tell her husband. She hires a private eye because she understandably wants to find her son. And this private investigator comes to her and has found something, but not what she thinks it is. The private investigator finds out that her husband is actually having an affair. And this is the thing that like snaps Marin back to life, because she's like, I'll be damned if I'm going to lose my son and lose my husband. And this revelation sends her on a trajectory to save her marriage, and she goes to, I say this in the best way possible as a reader, the best dark, twisted, messed up places to save her marriage. And I was here for it. And I know a lot of people shied away from this book because they didn't want to read about the kidnapping. What I will say, this is not spoilers, like on the opening pages, we find out their son gets kidnapped, and then we fast forward. And in listening to a lot of podcasts from Jennifer Hillier, because I love her, she is a mom, she has a young son, and she was trying to think of sort of what her biggest nightmare would be, and it would be having her son get kidnapped. So this was very much her confronting her fears and writing about what that truth felt like to her. And I think there is such a raw, beautiful writing to it. And I get it if it's not your jam that you don't want to read about it, which is totally fine. But I would say it is well worth the read, because it is about the mother's love and everything that she will do to keep her family together. And that's what this story is about. And what that kidnapping does to them, and the darkness that opens up in her, is really pretty incredible from a writing standpoint, from a story standpoint. So if you read Jar of Hearts, you know that Jennifer Hillier can go to some really dark places, and I really feel like she is someone who doesn't hold back, who doesn't pull punches, who doesn't shy away from putting real reality and darkness and ugliness on the page. And she's not afraid to make her characters say and do shocking things that maybe some of us would feel or think or do in those moments if we were in that same position. So I am just such a huge fan of hers. I have had the great pleasure of meeting her. I have seen her at conferences, and she to me just is, she is writer goals to me. I just think she's tremendous. But this was such a fun book. It was such a great page turner, and I just cannot wait to see what she comes up with next. So that's going to do it for part one of all the things I loved this year. So let me know if you guys have read any of these books, and if I didn't mention your favorite, let me know down below what it is, and then tune back in for part two to see the rest of all the things that I loved. So I will see you guys in the next video. Take care, guys. Bye.